I have a couple of stories that are loosely connected with narrow escapes. And these are my various experiences in life that are related to guns. I'm from Minnesota, as I said, in the fall, cool fall days, about 1953. I was 8 years old. And we were always used to hunters coming down from the Twin Cities with their beautiful, very expensive shotguns, and they would hunt on our land. And I was just an observer. I never really got into hunting very much. Moving ahead about 3 years, 1956 was the Hungarian Revolution. And my family, through our church, sponsored a displaced person from Budapest to come over to this country. And in his broken English, I remember him talking about how he narrowly escaped swimming through ice-cold waters, being shot at. He was part of the Hungarian resistance, the underground movement. And for a couple of years, he lived in our farm and helped us out. He was sort of a surrogate father to me. And this man who had been through hell and back was the most gentle, loving man you could ever imagine. And he was with us for a couple of years, and then he moved to the Twin Cities to work with one of my uncles. And his greatest concern was his son and his wife were still in Russian-occupied Hungary. And one day on his shortwave radio, he heard a broadcast that said that some of the resistance movement, which is where his son was supposed to be at the time, were executed in front of a firing squad. And when he heard that, he had a heart attack, fell over and hit his head and died. And the very next day, there was a telegram saying his son was not at that location at the time. 30, 40 years went by, and I was up at Mount Lemmon washing my face in some cold water. A lot of cabins up there don't maintain hot water. And when I did that, I had a flashback. I thought, I wonder what happened to Franz's son. Did he ever come over to this country? Because the reason for the connection of the cold water, we had a well. We lived on a farm, southern Minnesota. We had a big well in the center of the yard, along with running water in the house. And he would, every day, regardless of the temperature, in most days, he would go out there and wash in that ice-cold water to remind himself of where he came from. And when I did that, it was just an instant flashback. I thought, all these years that went by, what happened to his son? I went to the phone book managed to find a St. Paul phone book through the public library, dialed the phone number, the family name, and got a hold of the wife of his son. And she said, well, you're a couple of years too late. I explained who I was and the connection. And she said, my husband died a couple of years ago. He had a heart condition, but he had a son. And so within that same year, I managed to make a trip to the Twin Cities and met his wife and the son and shared my stories of the son's grandfather, who he had never met. And so that situation had a big impact on me. And so the other story is come forward now to 1988 in Tucson. I've been living here about 7 years. I arrived in 81, the year of the Great Flood, if any of you remember that. And I was out having a drink with some friends and was leaving a bar and was mugged and beaten, and my wallet was taken. And so after I got out of emergency and had a few stitches and stuff, I called on a friend, a foreign student from Morocco, who used to live with me because he had an extra set of keys. They had my keys, they had my wallet, they knew where I lived. That night I slept with a loaded gun. I didn't know if they were going to come in through the window or what. And my friend was really freaked out the way I looked. You know, a couple black eyes and quite a mess. And so he finally came down and stayed with me. He saw the gun. You know, to him it was something fairly glamorous. And so he stayed with me, and I decided that it was time for me to move. I had been thinking about it, been looking for a house for a long time, but with no success. So I gave my notice in the townhouse where I was living, had no idea where I was going to move to, and within 30 days found a house. Ran into my Moroccan friend Rita, who was living out of his car. And he looked at my house and he said, you know, I could live in one of your closets. It's a lot better than my car. So he came to live with me. And I was away in Christmas. I was actually, in the first part of December, I take that back. I was in Denver at a conference. And while I was gone, my friend Rita, who I didn't realize drank a lot, did some drugs, he found my gun, and there were some bullets. It was a .22 pistol. And he was drinking heavily, and he had a friend who was an alcoholic who was drinking. There were 2 empty, full bottles, 1 tequila and 1 something else. And he took the gun, and I'm not quite sure what the scenario was, but there were 2 dead bodies in my living room. And fortunately, as my neighbor said, I got back on a Monday, and this happened Sunday, so the bodies had been removed. I just came home to the bloodstains. And at that point, everything in my life just sort of came to a stop. I didn't eat. I didn't want to sleep there. Fortunately, you find out in situations like that who your friends are. And for about 10 days, I slept in different friends' sofas and on the floor and whatever was available. And part of what I got from that experience was that violence begets violence. You know, what was perpetrated on me, that gun my friend used, you know, if I had gotten rid of it, if it wasn't there, who knows what the situation might have been. And the last little part of this, I went in the military in 1963, and I was home on leave, and of course I learned how to, you know, shoot a gun and become a sharpshooter and all that. 1963, November, Kennedy was shot. And I was in uniform, and I was going from Minnesota to New York to Europe, and at every point along the way, I had people being in uniform come up to me, especially in another country, saying, "We are so sorry." And, you know, so I have very mixed feelings about guns, and no longer own one, but I'm very good at a crossbow, a knife, a bullwhip, and various things like that may not be lethal. With that, I guess all I can say, as we say in Minnesota, is you betcha. Thank you.